The story begins by introducing two characters, Emily, a cheerful and compassionate child, and Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who lives alone at the end of the street. Mr. Thompson is quiet and keeps to himself, and most of the neighbors have grown used to walking by his house without noticing him. Emily, curious and kind-hearted, notices Mr. Thompson every day as she walks to school. She waves at him, though he rarely responds. His worn-down house and lonely demeanor make her wonder if he's sad. One day, as Emily is coming back from school, she sees Mr. Thompson struggling with his groceries. The bags are heavy, and he's having a hard time carrying them up the stairs to his house. Without hesitation, Emily runs over to help. She picks up the bags and walks with Mr. Thompson to his front door. He is surprised and a bit flustered but quietly thanks her. Before leaving, Emily smiles brightly and says, "I hope you have a wonderful day, Mr. Thompson." That single sentence, filled with warmth and sincerity, lingers with him. After Emily's small act of kindness, Mr. Thompson begins to notice things he had forgotten about: the sounds of children playing outside, the smell of flowers from his neglected garden, and the warmth of the sunlight through his windows. The next morning, as Emily walks by his house again, Mr. Thompson is waiting. He waves for the first time in months. His wave is tentative, but Emily beams back with excitement. Over the next few days, Emily continues to greet him, and Mr. Thompson begins looking forward to their daily exchanges. He even finds himself smiling more often. One afternoon, Emily knocks on Mr. Thompson's door with a homemade card and a small flower from her garden. "Just because," she says cheerfully. Mr. Thompson invites her inside for tea. As they sit together, he shares stories from his younger days, how he used to love fixing things, how he once had a garden full of beautiful flowers, and how much he misses his late wife. Emily listens with wide eyes, her youthful curiosity blending with empathy. She suggests they start gardening together, and Mr. Thompson agrees, feeling a spark of hope he hasn't felt in years. Word spreads about Mr. Thompson and Emily's unlikely friendship. Soon, other neighbors begin to notice the changes. Mr. Thompson starts tending to his garden again, and his house, once forgotten, blooms with colorful flowers. The neighbors, inspired by Emily's kindness, begin checking in on Mr. Thompson, bringing baked goods, and inviting him to community events. What started as a small act of help has rippled through the neighborhood, fostering a sense of community that wasn't there before. As time passes, Mr. Thompson becomes a cherished part of the neighborhood. He helps fix broken fences, shares his wisdom with the younger kids, and attends local gatherings. The garden he and Emily started becomes a local attraction, known for its vibrant colors and the story behind it. Emily and Mr. Thompson's friendship, though simple, has touched many hearts. One day, as Mr. Thompson looks out at the garden, now in full bloom, he reflects on how one little act of kindness, the moment when Emily helped him with his groceries, changed everything. It not only brought light back into his life, but also helped him reconnect with the world around him. As the days pass, the bond between Emily and Mr. Thompson grows stronger. They meet almost every afternoon to work on the garden, with Mr. Thompson showing Emily how to plant seeds, water them, and care for them as they grow. Emily learns about patience and the rewards of nurturing something over time. She starts calling Mr. Thompson Grandpa Tom, and he, for the first time in years, feels like he belongs to a family again. One day, as they sit on a bench under a tree, watching the newly blooming flowers, Emily looks up and asks, "Grandpa Tom, were you always this happy?" Mr. Thompson pauses, reflecting on her question. He tells her about his earlier life, how he used to be outgoing and full of joy, especially when his wife was alive. But after she passed, loneliness took over, and he slowly withdrew from the world, feeling like there was no one left who cared. "I guess I forgot what it felt like to be needed, or to care for someone," Mr. Thompson says softly, his voice tinged with emotion. "But you reminded me, Emily." Emily takes his hand and smiles up at him. "I'm glad you're happy now. You're the best Grandpa Tom in the world." One afternoon, While Emily is at school, Mr. Thompson hears a knock at the door. To his surprise, it's one of his old friends, George, whom he hasn't spoken to in years. George had heard from neighbors about the changes in Mr. Thompson's life and came to visit. I heard you've been spending time with that sweet little girl down the street, George says with a grin. You've got quite the garden going too. Looks like the old Mr. Thompson is back. The two friends sit and talk for hours, reminiscing about the good old days and the times they spent together. George admits that he had also been feeling lonely after his wife passed, but seeing how Mr. Thompson had turned his life around gave him hope. By the end of the conversation, the two decide to make a pact. They agree to meet up once a week, sharing a cup of tea and working together in the garden. Mr. Thompson realizes that Emily's small act of kindness didn't just change his life, it also began to reconnect him with old friends and new relationships he never thought he'd have again. As Emily's birthday approaches, Mr. Thompson decides to do something special for her. He spends days secretly planning and working in the garden, creating a small area filled with her favorite flowers, bright sunflowers, daisies, and tulips. He even builds a tiny wooden bench with a plaque that reads, "Emily's Garden, for the little girl with the biggest heart." On the morning of her birthday, Emily rushes over to Mr. Thompson's house, excited to spend time with him as usual. When she arrives, he leads her to the back of the garden, revealing the surprise. Emily gasps in delight, her eyes wide with happiness. "It's beautiful, Grandpa Tom. You made this for me?" Mr. Thompson smiles warmly, nodding. "You've given me so much, Emily. This is just a small way to say thank you. Tears well up in Emily's eyes as she hugs him tightly. This is the best birthday ever. As they sit together on the new bench, surrounded by the flowers they've grown, Mr. Thompson feels a deep sense of contentment. For the first time in years, his heart feels full, not just with the joy of his own life but with the love and happiness he's able to share with someone else. The story ends on a broader note, showing how Emily's simple act of helping Mr. Thompson has created a ripple effect throughout the community. Neighbors, once disconnected, now greet each other warmly, inspired by the bond between Emily and Mr. Thompson. The children in the neighborhood visit Mr. Thompson's garden often, and he teaches them how to plant flowers, fix things, and enjoy the beauty of nature. He becomes a beloved figure in the community, known for his wisdom and gentle kindness. Even George, who had also been isolated, finds himself spending more time with old friends and making new ones. Emily's kindness not only changed Mr. Thompson's life, it sparked a transformation throughout the neighborhood, reminding everyone that small acts of care and connection have the power to bring people together. The final scene fades in on Mr. Thompson, now more vibrant than ever, sitting on the bench in Emily's garden, surrounded by blooming flowers. Emily sits beside him, and they both watch as new families move into the neighborhood, children laughing and playing in the distance. Mr. Thompson turns to Emily with a warm smile and says, "You know, Emily, this garden isn't just about flowers. It's about people, like you, who help things grow." Emily grins, her heart swelling with pride. "I'm glad we grew it together, Grandpa Tom." The camera pans out, revealing the beautiful garden in full bloom, symbolizing the love, kindness, and growth that Emily's simple act of kindness brought to the lives of many. The closing narration gently reminds viewers, sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can make the biggest difference. A simple gesture can plant the seeds of hope and connection, and those seeds will grow into something far greater than you ever imagined. As time goes on, the garden becomes a cherished part of the neighborhood. Mr. Thompson and Emily continue to work side by side, but it's not just them anymore. The garden grows into a community project where neighbors, old and young, come together. They plant new flowers, trim the bushes, and add decorations, each person leaving their own small mark on what has now become a symbol of kindness and togetherness. One day, Emily's school teacher, Miss Clark, hears about the garden and decides to bring her class to visit. She introduces her students to Mr. Thompson and tells them the story of how one small act of kindness blossomed into something beautiful. As Mr. Thompson shows the children around, he tells them, the thing about kindness is that it never stays small. When you share it, it grows, just like this garden. Every flower here represents someone's kindness. One of the children, a shy boy named Daniel, approaches Mr. Thompson and quietly asks, "Do you think I could help, too? I'm not very good at gardening, but I want to try." Mr. Thompson smiles warmly and kneels down to Daniel's level. "Of course, you can help. The only thing you need to grow something special is a little bit of care and a big heart, and I think you've got both." The story of Emily and Mr. Thompson's garden spreads beyond the neighborhood. Soon, other communities hear about it, and similar kindness projects start popping up in nearby towns. Some create gardens, others organize food drives, and some even form groups to visit elderly residents in nursing homes, all inspired by Emily's simple act of helping Mr. Thompson with his groceries. Emily becomes a bit of a local hero, not because she sought attention, but because her genuine care for one person sparked a movement. She is invited to speak at her school assembly about kindness and what it means to her. Standing on the stage, a bit nervous but full of heart, she shares, "It's not about doing big things or being famous. It's about noticing when someone needs help and doing something, even if it's small. Sometimes, a smile or a helping hand is all it takes to change someone's life." As the years go by, Mr. Thompson grows older, but his heart stays young, thanks to Emily and the joy she brought back into his life. He continues to work in the garden, now filled with so many flowers that it's become a local landmark. People from all over come to see Emily's garden and hear the story behind it. One day, as Mr. Thompson sits on the bench, now well-worn from the many visitors who have come to sit and reflect, he looks out at the vibrant flowers, the bright sunshine, and the cheerful laughter of children playing nearby. He feels a deep sense of peace. Emily, now a teenager, still visits him often, though their roles have begun to shift. She helps him with tasks that have become too hard for him, always reminding him of how much she cares. But she knows that everything she's learned about kindness, patience, and love came from her friendship with Mr. Thompson. "Grandpa Tom," she says one afternoon, as they sit in the garden, "do you think this will keep going? You know, after we're gone?" Mr. Thompson, with a wise and gentle smile, replies, "Kindness never really ends, Emily. It's like a seed. Once it's planted, it keeps growing, even when we're not around to see it. This garden, these flowers, and everything we've done, it'll keep blooming in people's hearts." Emily nods, understanding that what they've created together is more than just a garden. It's a legacy of kindness that will live on long after they're gone. One sunny afternoon, years after their first meeting, Mr. Thompson surprises Emily with a gift. He hands her a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside, Emily finds a collection of seeds, flowers they've grown together, carefully harvested by Mr. Thompson. "These are for you," he says, his voice filled with emotion. "One day, you'll start your own garden. And maybe you'll find someone, like I found you, who could use a little kindness." Tears fill Emily's eyes as she hugs him tightly. "Thank you, Grandpa Tom. I'll never forget everything you've taught me." As the story draws to a close, we see a time-lapse of the garden evolving through the seasons, flowers blooming, children playing, and the community continuing to gather. Even after Mr. Thompson passes away, his spirit and the lessons he shared with Emily remain alive in the garden. Years later, Emily, now an adult, stands in a new garden of her own, this time with a young child beside her. She kneels down and hands them a seed, just like Mr. Thompson once did for her. "This is where it all starts," she tells the child with a warm smile. "With a little bit of kindness." The camera pulls back, revealing the garden in full bloom, as Emily's legacy of kindness continues, just as Mr. Thompson had predicted.
Kindness, like a seed, grows when it is nurtured. A single act of love can create ripples that touch lives, spread joy, and inspire generations. No act of kindness is ever too small.